Welcome to the PDB Situation Report. Now, I'm Mike Baker, your eyes and ears on the world stage. All right, let's get briefed. In today's spotlight, a week after the failed assassination attempt on President Trump, new details have emerged about critical security failures by the Secret Service. Now, to help us break it all down, we'll be joined by retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent James Gagliano. A little later in the show, just hours after the failed attempt on Trump's life, we learned that U.S. authorities had intelligence on a recent Iranian plot to assassinate him. Joining us to discuss that is Richard Goldberg, former director for countering Iranian weapons of mass destruction for the White House National Security Council under President Trump. That would not fit easily on a business card. But first, today's Situation Report spotlight. It's been about a week since the failed assassination attempt on President Trump during a campaign rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania. And as you already know, the would-be assassin, Thomas Matthew Crooks, grazed Trump, killed one rally-goer, and critically wounded two others. Now, in the days since, as facts have emerged, we've learned of a number of critical failures by the U.S. Secret Service and local law enforcement, which allowed the would-be assassin to take multiple shots at the president. This includes the failure to secure a rooftop with line of sight to the rally stage, mind you, just 130 yards away from where the former president was speaking. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle has come under intense scrutiny in the days since for her agency's handling of the event and apparent failures. While she said that the full blame lays with the Secret Service and has stated that, quote, the buck stops with her, she's offered some baffling excuses as to why these failures happened. Most notably, she told ABC News that the failure to secure the rooftop was due in part to the fact that it was a sloped roof. Yeah, sloped roof. By the way, if the buck did indeed stop with her, she would be unemployed at this point. But it's Washington, D.C., where the buck stops here actually means well, that buck is getting passed around indefinitely, or at least until the next news cycle. In addition, we've learned very little about the motive of the 20-year-old shooter. Now, he appears to have been a loner with very little social media footprint. Okay, joining me now to help us unpack these security failures leading up to the attack is James Gagliano, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent. He's served 25 years in the FBI, including assignment to the FBI's elite counterterror unit, the hostage rescue team, and as senior team leader of the FBI's New York Field Division SWAT team. James, thank you very, very much for taking the time.
Mike, it's good to join you.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a very broad question here. Good God, what went wrong?
Yeah, I think, Mike, we're at a point right now where there are so many more questions than answers. And as you pointed out, we're just coming up on 1 week ago. I mean, it was last Saturday at 6:12 p.m. that the former president and current presidential candidate came under fire from someone about 130 yards away, perched on top of a rooftop with full view of the candidate, and it's unconscionable. And I heard you mention in the windup to this about the Secret Service director and how she has taken responsibility and yet deflected and kind of distracted away from what appear to be a colossal set of cascading systems failures here. I cannot imagine how something of this magnitude, and I understand it's not a national special security event. It's not akin to the RNC in Milwaukee, where the resources are plentiful and abundant. There's hundreds of police agencies that are all integrated. There are tabletop exercises, field training exercises running up to it. That's not what this was. This was a former president. It looks like there was a paucity of resources from the federal side of this. They're forced to integrate with the local community, the Pennsylvania State Police, as well as the Butler Township Police. But Mike, you called it. This, when the independent review of this is conducted and the FBI conducts a review of this, there are going to be a set of colossal failures that never, ever, ever should have happened here.
Okay, now I want to back up just a little bit because you made an important point. You referenced national security events and the fact that this was not one. This was a campaign event. two things. Could you explain to our audience sort of the process involved? You get a national security event like the RNC that's been going on, but also as a sidebar here, do you know or have you heard of at what point this campaign rally that took place in Pennsylvania on Saturday, at what point was that put on the calendar as an event for the Secret Service?
Sure. So, as being the FBI senior team leader in the New York City division back in 2004, 20 years ago, this upcoming month, I was the tactical response team leader for the Republican National Convention that was held at Madison Square Garden. That was something that we planned out in advance over a year. So we worked hand in glove with the Secret Service, with the New York City Police Department, with the New York State Police, and a whole host of federal, state, and other local police departments to prep for that. And as you pointed out, it's an NSSE, a National Special Security Event. These are things that resources are not an issue. They're major events. I've said to people that have been asking me about this all week, Milwaukee's Fiserv Center right now, where the RNC is going on, is the safest place to be on earth. That is in direct opposite, polar opposite end of Butler, Pennsylvania on Saturday. And why was that? I don't know for certain, but having been involved in dignitary protection, I worked on 3 attorney general's details, Janet Reno's, John Ashcroft's, and Alberto Gonzalez's. And I worked protecting 2 FBI directors, Director Mueller and Director Free. Something like this, where you're dealing with a candidate who's conducting a whistle-stop tour, they probably got information that he was going to Butler, Pennsylvania a week or less in advance. Now, that's no excuses. It's no excuse that somebody could have been able to access a rooftop 130 yards away. That's unconscionable. It's no excuse that the site advance plan did not put that place into play, meaning if they didn't have a drone over the top of it or they didn't control access to the top of it, there should have been somebody on top of it. So colossal failure there, but I will give the service the benefit of the doubt that this was not something planned far in advance, where there were times to coordinate it and get the necessary resources. There were a paucity of resources there, and it's probably something, Mike, that got put on the calendar a few days, if not a week or so in advance.
Okay, now, I think, yeah, that is logical. That makes perfect sense, and it's just the way that it works. But is it fair to say that, fine, you've got a resource issue when you're talking about a short time fuse for an event, right? Like the event in Pennsylvania compared to a national security event. But on the operational side, you've got protocols in place, right? So not to oversimplify it, but every event you tend to step through, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you tend to step through the same methodology, right? You do the same things over and over again, which in part is why this can be such a mind-numbing business, because of the repetitive nature of it. But that also means that you are stepping through certain things every time to create your security plan for that particular event.
Oh, no doubt. And the 5-paragraph military operations order applies. It applied when I was in SWAT. It applied when I was on the FBI's hostage rescue team. It applied when I worked overseas with Joint Special Operations Command. It applies. Situation, mission, execution, administration, and command and control. In this instance, it's going to be easy. And this is the typical thing that comes out of every single hot wash or after action review that was conducted after an operation, whether it was a training mission or whether it was a real life crisis incident. And there's always going to be complaints about communication. And people said to me, well, Jimmy, why couldn't the counter snipers from the Secret Service speak to the police officers that were on the ground? Mike, you know as well as I do, in an operation like this, there were probably 6 or 7, maybe 8 different frequencies. You're going to have a command frequency. You're going to have your state police on one frequency, your local police on another frequency. The counter sniper team is on one. The counter assault team's on another. The protection detail, the body people that were up on the stage, they're going to be on another. Now, yes, you have to have liaisons that go through the command post or the Joint Operations Center and get that real-time information. Hey, there's a guy up on the roof. We think he has a gun. How does that not get translated where it needs to get to and passed along? That is the fog of war. And brother, I know you've been in some hairy places in your life, as I certainly have. And it is the fog of war. We know that there were some 90 seconds before some of the video shows where people were pointing out where the sniper was on the roof before the Secret Service actually was able to engage him after he had already fired off 8 shots of 5.56 at the head of a former president. Unconscionable, but again, it's gonna probably come down to fog of war, communication issues, and maybe to your point at the top of this, were there any flaws with the site planning? Did they look at that rooftop as not a threat or not as something that needed to be owned? Look, let's go back to December of 1963. The Secret Service realized then that somebody up in a book depository could take shots at an open air convertible that the President of the United States was traveling in Dallas and assassinate him. So everything changed and it became the you have to own the high ground. Clearly, in this instance, Mike, that didn't happen.
Yeah, look, I mean, you bring up the Kennedy assassination. I've actually, taken sites out of that window that Lee Harvey Oswald used and looked at in depth his time there and establishing himself and understanding and scouting out his position there ahead of the convoy that came through. So, I guess part of the problem I think that the Secret Service is facing right now is the immediacy of information flow. Right? I mean, in events past, people had to sit and wait for the news to tell them what was going on. There were so many people in attendance at that event with smartphones and taking video and the different angles that it covered, and also just the speed of information that it flows through social media now, that we need transparency from the Secret Service and local law enforcement as to how this all fell apart. But at the same time, we've already got some transparency that is conflicting with some of the responses that we're getting from Secret Service. So I think that's creating, I mean, again, it's a crisis communications issue. They're compounding what is already a very bad situation by the way that they're handling it. Now, I don't want to disappear down that rabbit hole just yet, but you mentioned communications and you mentioned the different freaks that would be used for this. And the fact that it's much more complicated, I think, than people understand, at least initially. But again, going back to the idea that this is done over and over and over again. It's not the first time they've had to use local assets at a campaign event of any sort, whether it's with the former president or anyone else. So they're walking through various steps. Now, I think one of the things that also is confusing people is, look, there must have been a site assessment and a security ops plan for this. And so wouldn't that then have to be given final approval, reviewed again just prior to all of this? And we're not even getting to some of the, immediacy of we've spotted a suspicious individual. How about we hold the former president in a secure place until we sort this out? Again, I'm not sure. I don't necessarily have a question for you, James. I think I'm as confused as a lot of people out there. And I'm looking for your perspective on some of this without asking you to speculate. That's not fair to you. So, talk to me about, really go anywhere with you, because I think people will find any direction we go interesting at this point.
Yeah, I think, Mike, you certainly understand, having, again, been in the business, as we say, that we're very careful. We want to make sure that the investigation is conducted. There'll be an internal review by the Secret Service. And remember, the Secret Service answers under the Department of Homeland Security since 2002, post 9/11. So there'll be an investigation by the Department of Homeland Security. The FBI is being pulled in to obviously investigate this as well. And then the president the other night stated that from the Oval Office that there would be an independent review. I don't know what that meant, if they were going to bring outside contractors, but there will be an independent review. There will be a number of reviews on this. I'm never in the business of shilling. I bleed FBI blue and gold. I spent 25 years, retired at age 50. So half of my life in the FBI. I love the agency. I love the mission. I love the men and women in it, but I never shill for it. And I will never shill for law enforcement in a situation where you and I are looking at this and saying, what can we do to prevent the next one? Where was the breakdown? And look, there's plenty of things that you could use to excuse this. Jimmy, op tempo. Now, op tempo is a word that you understand, but for your listeners that might not be familiar with it, it's operational tempo. And following a presidential candidate around, such as the former president Donald Trump, polarizing figure. The people that love him love him. The people that loathe him loathe him. So there's probably plenty of chatter. You already spoke about it. Potentially could a bad state actor like Iran have put out a hit on him? Could another bad state actor, North Korea, Russia, China, and then locally, the fact that we're a bifurcated nation. So I just laid the groundwork to say, yes, there should have been a heightened sense of awareness here. But the Secret Service has limited resources like everybody else. And the way they conduct their operations, they cannot do it. Their primary mission is protecting the president or whatever other dignitary or dignitaries' families they're assigned to without resources. Now, Representative Waltz from, I believe he's a Republican from the state of Florida, has accused Secretary Mayorkas, who runs the Department of Homeland Security, of denying a request for additional assets and resources from the Secret Service to protect the former president. That will be fleshed out in the investigation. But okay, let's start from the position. Let's just assume that, let's stipulate that there were limited numbers of people there to do the job. To your point, they still had to conduct a site advance. That meant that members of the Secret Service went out to that location in Butler, Pennsylvania, linked up with the local police, linked up with Pennsylvania State Police, walked the area, did sight lines, looked at the high ground, looked at what the threat would be regarding the actual terrain. They did a terrain walk. And then they had to augment with state and local police. Now, I'll say this. Right. There's 327 million people in this country. Only 770,000 of them, a percentage of less than 1%, are involved in law enforcement. We love the police. We back the blue. We love the police. You and I have worked through our careers with numbers of police agencies. They're the best of the best. But Mike, they're not all equal. And in one area, you may be working with the finest, and in another area, they don't have the gear, equipment, training, or wherewithal. I'm not casting shade on the Butler Township Police Department. I'm not, because the investigation hasn't been conducted. But I think that's the conundrum that the Secret Service has put in. They could be working with the NYPD one day, and they could be working with some tiny police department with 3 uniformed police officers that has never handled a crisis incident before. And I think that's the problem here, is that when they're following a candidate around the country, and they have to provide him protection as a presidential candidate and as a former president, it leaves it wide open that you don't always get the same level of talent and expertise from your law enforcement partners.
Yeah, that opens up some additional questions that I want to get to straight away. But first of all, James, if you'll stay right there, we are going to take a quick break because we have some terrific sponsors. When we come back, we'll have more on the attempted assassination of former President Trump. Hey, if you're a listener to the PDB, well, you know there's a lot going on in the world today. And by a lot, I mean, well, a lot. Authoritarian regimes on the march, wars overseas, and political turmoil across the globe. Isn't that cheery? This is why, now more than ever, you should support those on the right side of history. Now, Blackout Coffee, let's talk about them. They're committed to your values, supporting constitutional rights, and certainly those on the front lines. The troops, local law enforcement. Look, Blackout Coffee honors all hardworking Americans. I'm proud to recommend Blackout Coffee. This is a coffee company that's 100% committed to American traditional values. From sourcing the beans to the roasting process, customer support and shipping, they've got an incredible work ethic, and they're dedicated to promoting your principles, and they accept no compromise on taste or quality. Check out blackoutcoffee.com/PDB and use coupon code PDB for 20% off your first order. Look, ditch those other guys. I'm telling you, this is great coffee. Blackout Coffee remains true to your values. That's blackoutcoffee.com/PDB and use coupon code PDB for 20% off your first order. As we say around here, be awake, not woke. Welcome back. We're talking about the security failures that led to the failed assassination attempt on President Donald Trump. during a campaign rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania. Our guest, James Gagliano, retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent, is helping us to unpack what went wrong. And there clearly is a fair amount to unpack here. James, before the break, we were talking about, and you were talking about the variations in abilities, training, resources for local law enforcement, which oftentimes is called on to augment the Secret Service element that's involved in any protectee detail. Now, am I wrong in saying that whether it's Butler County, where the assassination attempt was, or any other place, when you're talking about this type of event, the Secret Service, though, has primacy? Is that correct? I mean, they're the final decider, as George W. used to say.
Absolutely. And related to a presidential decision directive many years ago, they are the lead agency where it comes to protecting the president and his family. And in this instance, they would have controlled it. I referenced before 2004 when I was the FBI chief in New York City, and our role there as part of the counter assault or the take back team, again, was underneath the Secret Service. They're the lead agency where it comes to presidential protection. And look, they've been doing it a long time. And Mike, I think another piece of this is we're talking about breakdowns, whether it's in comms or the fact that you don't always know what you're going to get in regards to the local law enforcement resources that are provided to you, and the Secret Service relies heavily on that. It's also a little bit in intelligence. I mean, we've been in the business of having presidents assassinated since 1865 when it happened with President Lincoln. I think the next one was 1881, President Garfield. Then 1901 with President McKinley, and 1963 we talked about President Kennedy. And 43 years ago, we had the attempted assassination of President Reagan. This is the charter mission. This is the primary mission of the Secret Service. But, I want to look at and see from the after action review here, whichever report comes out, to what was the intelligence. We know that there had been some chatter about, foreign nation states, bad state actors looking to do something to harm the former president. The Secret Service fields daily just a plethora of online kooks. 99% of them are just like keyboard warriors, and we know about those kind of people. But there's that maybe less than 1% that you actually have to worry about. Will they translate that overheated rhetoric and that language, that heated language, which could be construed as hyperbole, but could also translate into actual action? They've got to track those folks down. So intelligence is important. Right. I think the other piece of this is complacency. And again, I am not suggesting in any way, shape, or form I was not, but I remember a long time ago a senior agent telling me that complacency kills. And if you don't, when you're on a surveillance mission or when you're protecting a dignitary or a protectee, it's easy to quote unquote fall asleep at the switch because it is a boring, mind-numbingly mundane task. Yep. So that's an issue. And then lastly, Mike, I think this is something you probably know from your previous life, but in a free and open society, we don't live under martial law, and the president doesn't live in a bunker 24/7, 365. In a free and open society, there is not one human being on this planet, including the president of the United States, the current sitting president of the United States, that can't be assassinated. So long as you live in a free and open society and politicians want to get out, shake hands, kiss babies, press the flesh, campaign, and do those kind of things, so long as the criminal or the terrorist is willing to die in the conduct of the attempt. And that's what we saw here. Somebody that was obviously willing to die and was able to take a shot at the president. Something the Secret Service, I'm sure right now, is tortured by and are conducting reviews internally to figure out how to prevent this from happening the next time.
Yeah, look, I think the world that you lived in terms of, dealing with protectees and the world that I spent a long time in counterterrorism operations, I mean, we're both faced with the same problem, right? Which is you can't afford a failure. You got to get it right all the time. Right. And the bad guy, whether it's a terrorist organization or a lone wolf, attempting an assassination, they just need to be right one time. And so But that doesn't, again, that doesn't excuse what's going on. I'm just saying that there's complexities here that sometimes get lost in the initial, rush to, unfortunately, to judgment. But I think everybody saw, like we mentioned earlier on in the discussion, so many people have watched this that I'm always the first to say you got to let the investigation run its course. You got to allow the time for the facts and the evidence to develop. This is one of those really odd moments in time where people saw what they saw, and people with absolutely no experience can make a judgment that says, how did they not cover down a building that close with line of sight? And then, by the way, how did they get advance information about this suspicious person, not hold off and getting the president out there, the former president out there? How did they spend so much time deciding go, no go on taking a shot on the shooter? What are all those things? Now, people are, it's human nature, right? People are going to jump to conclusions. But again, in this case, they're helped along in that process by a lot of information coming out almost immediately after the fact, rather than waiting for the Secret Service to discuss this case. I go back to the same thing again, which is I am shocked, not just by the events of Saturday, but I am shocked by the ineptness of the Secret Service director and ultimately their oversight, the DHS, and I think that could be a problem too. That they've been subsumed by DHS in terms of crisis management and understanding the importance of dealing with this issue immediately. Your thoughts, obviously, very welcome.
Yeah,
there.
well, in our former businesses, you never wanted to intersect politics with our job. We did our job. We followed the evidence bereft of fear or favor. We did our jobs so long as it was a lawful order we were given. We acted on behalf of the U.S. government. We followed the mission. We did what we were supposed to do. But I don't know about your experiences in your previous life, but I retired 8 years ago, and I have noticed that there have been distractions, and whether or not you want to argue about DEI or the fact that the U.S. military, as well as federal law enforcement and all the agencies, all the acronyms out there, right? They're all now so beholden to things that are so far from what they used to be focused on. It's no longer a meritocracy. And again, I'm not going to impugn the agents that were there. There were a number of them that rushed to the sound of the gun, piled on top of the former president, put their body between the president and a 223 round. That is admirable, honorable. Those are true heroes. But are the best of the best being assigned to these details? Or are we checking boxes? And I'm sure your listeners can read between the lines on that. I think the frustration is or was the Secret Service director the best person for the job? Or, as the New York Post has reported, was she selected because she served when Vice President Biden's wife was the second lady, and she served on the detail protecting the second lady, and now the second lady, who's the first lady, decided that this person is the best person and pushed to get her hired? Again, that's
James. James, she may be the first lady, or she may be the acting president at this point. We're not really clear on that.
I was trying to be kind.
James Gagliano, he's retired FBI Supervisory Special Agent, but that title doesn't do him justice in terms of the decades of experience that he's had that gives him the insight that he's just shared with us. All right, up next, we'll look at a story that emerged just hours after the failed attempt in Pennsylvania, an Iranian plot to assassinate Trump. We'll be joined by Richard Goldberg. He's the former director for countering Iranian weapons of mass destruction for the White House National Security Council, the NSC, under President Trump. We'll be right back. Are you overwhelmed with back taxes or unfiled returns? I'm sorry, I don't mean to scare you. But with 88,000 newly hired agents, that's 88,000 of them, the IRS has increased enforcement, issuing millions of pay-up notices in 2024. How would you like to walk out to your mailbox and get a pay-up notice? Well, look, don't face the IRS collection tactics alone. Tax Network USA can help. As the nation's premier tax relief firm, they've negotiated over $1 billion, that's with a B, in tax relief for clients. Services include penalty forgiveness, hardship programs, and offer and compromise solutions. Look, whether you owe $10,000 or $10 million, that's a lot of money, their experts can assist. Behind on taxes? Well, they can guide you in catching up. Protect your financial security. Contact Tax Network USA for strategic advice on reducing or eliminating your tax debt. To schedule a complimentary consultation, call 1-800-245-6000 or visit tnusa.com. Look, don't let the IRS control your life. Empower yourself with Tax Network USA's support and take charge of your financial future. Visit tnusa.com today. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. U.S. authorities recently obtained intelligence from a source revealing a plot by Iran to assassinate Donald Trump. Now, this alarming information led the Secret Service to ramp up security around the former president. Now, look, I don't want to sound surly, but does that mean that what we saw during the assassination attempt on Saturday was the beefed up, enhanced security package for the former president? We'll talk about that some other time. U.S. officials have stated that they believe the attack on the rally in Butler County, Pennsylvania, was unrelated to any Iranian effort. But despite this, there remains a significant concern, of course, about the Iranian regime's intentions. U.S. intelligence has long warned that Iran might seek to avenge the death of Iranian Commander Qasem Soleimani, who was killed in a 2020 U.S. drone strike authorized by the Trump administration. Now, this ongoing threat continues to be a focal point for U.S. security agencies. Iranian officials have, of course, no surprise, rejected these reports, insisting that the Islamic nation is only pursuing a legal path, of course they are, to hold Trump accountable for ordering Soleimani's assassination. They maintain that their focus is on seeking justice through international legal channels because, as you can imagine, the Iranian regime is all about following international laws and norms. Joining me now to dive deeper into this situation is Richard Goldberg, former director for countering Iranian weapons of mass destruction for the White House National Security Council, the NSC, under President Trump, and a senior advisor at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Richard, thank you very much for taking time out. I understand you're in Milwaukee at the RNC, so I know your schedule is probably very chaotic.
No, it's great to be with you.
Well, thank you. Listen, let's start off with this threat assessment that has been disclosed shortly after the assassination attempt on Saturday in Pennsylvania. What can you tell us about it?
Well, what we've understood so far is what you've seen in the news. There is some sort of verified, potentially highly reliable human intelligence source that has provided some level of intelligence to our intelligence services, the CIA or other. Perhaps it came through a partner like Israel or a different country that passed along the intelligence. But it's something that was credible enough, according to the reporting, to be taken seriously that there was an active plot by the Iranians to take out the former president. Now, we have seen some of these plots materialize in public, so we know a little bit of the tactics that they've engaged in. John Bolton, the former national security advisor, has been targeted with indictments surrounding sort of near misses where folks have already been in motion to kill Bolton. We've seen reporting that there have been similar plots disrupted against Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State. There may be things going on against Robert O'Brien, the former national security advisor, and certainly we know Brian Hook, the former special envoy, also has very heightened security around him based on the threat environment. What we have seen in the past is the Iranians look for some sort of contract killers. It could be Eastern Europeans. We've seen some of those types of folks used in the kidnapping plots, the murder plots alleged against Iranian Americans like Masih Alinejad, who the Iranians just in the last couple of years tried to kidnap from New York, send another squad towards her home that got disrupted mid-plot. So, we don't know who we would be looking for. The idea that you're looking for an Iranian who's like walking around doing something is not exactly the plot twist here. This would be probably subcontracted to Eastern European gang or a mob or somebody else. They could be on the dark web. They could be using various blockchains, crypto to pay for things like that. So we don't have the details here. What we know is that there was an active plot. We know that we could have assumed, based on the reporting of other former Trump officials, that this sort of thing would be likely. Pretty brazen, though, to really put something in motion in an election year when he is running for president to return. I mean, it's always horrific. It's always an attack on our democracy to try to assassinate a former president. But while he is running to be the president again, that is trying to really undermine, just throw a grenade into our democracy and try to tear our country apart. So I would imagine there should be a major response from the U.S. government for this happening. Economic consequences, military consequences, covert consequences. What have we seen so far? Just a couple days ago, the administration renewed a sanctions waiver to give the regime access to $10 billion, and there's been no major crackdown on their oil sales, let alone any news of other types of activities, of things blowing up or people going bye-bye. So, wow, if you're the regime and it's just like there's nothing they can do to escalate that wins a response that incurs a consequence from the Biden administration, whether it's launching 120 ballistic missiles at the state of Israel, killing 3 Americans in Jordan, plotting to kill the former president. I don't know what it's supposed to take to actually show this regime some consequences, but apparently for the Biden administration, the lingering hope, the candle still being lit for a nuclear deal, still trumps all of it.
Yeah, Richard, I do want to talk about the recent political developments within the Iranian regime. But first, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more from Richard Goldberg. If you've been paying attention to the financial news, and I hope you have, experts are beginning to express concern that the U.S. dollar may lose its status as the world standard. Look, the warning signs are already there. Saudi Arabia ending the petrodollar, Russia replacing U.S. dollars with the Chinese currency trades, and BRICS. Well, the BRICS countries are attracting countries moving away from the U.S. dollar. Look, the global de-dollarization trend, as we call it, is accelerating. And in times of uncertainty, well, gold is security. Call the proud Americans of the Patriot Gold Group today before it's too late. Look, mention PDB, and you'll always get best-in-class service from Patriots protecting Patriots. The Patriot Gold Group has the no-fee-for-life IRA, where your IRA or 401k can be in physical gold and silver. And you may be eligible for the no-fee-for-life IRA on qualifying rollovers. Look, call 1-888-870-5457 for a free investor guide. Patriot Gold Group is Consumer Affairs' top-rated gold IRA dealer for 7 years in a row. That's a lot of years in a row. Call 1-888-870-5457. Welcome back to the PDB Situation Report. I want to bring back our guest, former National Security Council official Richard Goldberg. Richard, let's shift gears slightly away from the threat that was just discussed related to former President Trump. And let's go inside of Tehran. And if you could talk to me a bit about the recent political developments, mostly the new president. They refer to him as a moderate. But tell me what you know about him and whether you think that this signals any type of change within the Iranian regime.
Well, I believe that a moderate in this regime is a regime official who's out of bullets. That's the definition of a moderate for me. But, there has been in the past this distinction between reformist and hardliner, which was something that was nuanced within the regime system itself. It was misinterpreted in the West, spun into people who are moderate for hardliners. Not ever what it was. It's the idea that you could, within the confines of the Islamic Republic, as long as you respect the system, respect the supreme leader, continue to pledge yourself to the Islamic Revolution, death to America, death to Israel, all the good, that you could still somehow maneuver and change some rules and improve life and modernize within that system. There was this camp that believed that in the late 1990s. One of the presidents, Tommy, represented that camp. Over the last 20 years or so, those that continue to believe that that was possible have diminished. And certainly since the 2019 uprising that was put down by the supreme leader with thousands of people killed in the streets. And now, even more recently, with the Masa Amini uprising of 2022 into 2023, as you saw the nation up really, say, death to the dictator at this point, across all kinds of economic, ethnic, demographics, women at the forefront. You no longer saw any support for this idea of reforming the regime from within. Everybody sort of opposed to the idea of the regime. And this last election that they held, important for a few reasons. Number one, obviously, Ibrahim Raisi, who was the president who went down in that helicopter crash, was picked for a reason. This was somebody who was very loyal and close to the supreme leader. Whether Khamenei wanted to have Raisi take over for him as supreme leader, and this was a transition play, or have somebody who was so loyal and dependable be in the position of president under the supreme leader while a transition would take place, we don't know. What we do know is that whatever the plan was, the plan kind of went out the window with the helicopter going down, and they went into this snap election under their constitution. And so what I kind of see is they could have gone with a Raisi-type clone, somebody who was really viewed as hardline, was within the system, an Ayatollah, a mullah, somebody close to the supreme leader. They've gone with somebody who at least has the New York Times believing that he's a moderate, that he's a reformist. And the question is why? Why would you want that? It's a person who has a mixed bag, has pledged loyalty to the supreme leader in the Islamic Revolution, has pledged to keep working against the West, has pledged support to all the terror organizations that Iran funds. He doesn't control the nuclear program or the IRGC. That's the supreme leader's domain. But he has also, at the same time, spoken out against cracking down on women's rights, perhaps loosening the rules on the wearing of hijab, which was at the source of the spark of those riots, the uprising, the protest movement back in 2022 and 2023. Right. Is this a play to just remove the stress from the system in a moment of instability because Raisi died and have some sort of an off-ramp for grievances among the population while the supreme leader continues his transition plan? Or is it a hedge on Donald Trump coming back into office? That he wants to appeal to Donald Trump to try to make another deal. Don't go right back to maximum pressure strategies. Don't put pressure on this regime. We might be willing to do a nuclear deal with you and try to appeal to Trump's transactional sentiment in that way. I think whatever it is, let's remember the guy who runs the country as the supreme leader. Donald Trump's the president who's just learned that there's an active assassination plot to kill him. We know how he treated the regime when he was president the first time. Qasem Soleimani is no longer on this earth because they escalated. If they think they're going to rope-a-dope him into something else, I think they got another thing coming. Mm-hmm. Pick this guy, pick a different person, a hardliner, a moderate, whatever you want to call them. They're all part of a regime that's the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, building larger and larger, longer-range missiles and a nuclear weapons program to boot.
Richard Goldberg, Senior Advisor at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, former NSC official. Listen, thank you very much, Richard, for your time. I hope you'll agree to come back and talk to us more, because I suspect Iran will continue to take headlines over the next handful of years. But thank you again for your time.
Yeah, you bet. Anytime.
Excellent. Listen, thanks. That's all the time. Oh my gosh, would you look at the time? Look at the time. That's all we have for the PDB Situation Report. That was a smooth ending, wasn't it? If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, humorous anecdotes, whatever, please reach out to me at pdb@thefirsttv.com. Look, the PDB staff, including, don't forget our crack team of interns, they very much enjoy getting your emails, your faxes, your beeper messages, whatever. We take a bunch of them each month, as you may know, and compile them into our regular Ask Me Anything podcast sessions. And of course, to listen to the podcast of the show ad-free, well, you know what to do. You can become a premium member of the President's Daily Brief by visiting pdbpremium.com. Could not be easier. I'm Mike Baker, and until next time, you know the drill. Stay informed, stay safe, stay cool.